Bienvenidos a otra edición de Conversaciones de CRM con Jesús Hoyos. Como ya saben, estamos ahora en LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. El disclaimer, pues estamos en live stream. Aparentemente me estoy frizando por lo que me dijo Paul y Brent y veo que no tengo, la internet se me está cayendo, pero let's hope for the best. I'm going to switch to English now. Welcome, Paul and Brent, to Conversaciones de
Jesus.
CRM.
Jesus. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Likewise.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. This is fun.
No. Yeah, the disclaimer here that I was saying in Spanish, it looks like I'm choppy for whatever reason. I see that I have lower bars on the internet, but it's connected, should be working. So that's the disclaimer. Hopefully, it will work. But like I was saying, this is Conversaciones de CRM, CRM conversations that many years ago I used to do with Stefan Kolsky, like 3 or 4 times a year when we meet somewhere. Okay.
And it may seem like many years ago, but it was actually only last year you were doing it.
Yeah, I know why. We started to pick up that every week. I know. We started to pick up every week with different, friends and colleagues in the industry. And, so I think it was about time to have, Paul and Brent. For those who are joining us for the first time, hopefully you know who's Paul Greenberg and Brent Leary. But let me do the quick introductions. Brent Leary was CRM Essentials and host of CRM Playaz. And Paul Greenberg, CRM at the speed of light, author and all of the above, and plus host of CRM Playaz. And the whole idea today was, to talk a little bit about, CRM and CX, and this is like sort of like a crossover. They're here today. I'm going to be with them on Thursday. Okay, so the plan here is to discuss, what is going on in the industry, CRM versus CX. Let me throw that out there. There's a lot of talk about CX, CRM. CRM is dead. CX is the new thing. But my question here, the way I see it, and some of the realities and trends that I see in Latin America is that people want simplicity in terms of technology, pricing, simplicity in pricing, simplicity in integration. They want ecosystem. They are like inclusive. They are not integrated. Everything is together. And there's some vendors who are doing that. Sugar, Freshworks, Soho One, and Microsoft at the same time. But there's 200 million applications out there. And even though we want to say that, we're moving to customer engagement and CX, I think the vendors are not ready.
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I have to speak from my venerable position.
That's right.
That's right. I have to speak.
He's venerable Paul Greenberg.
As venerable here, like meaning I'm old. That's Brent's way of telling me I'm old. He called me venerable.
I didn't say that. I didn't.
Yes,
Steve Gilmore said that because I called him.
Well, that's kind of what venerable means, right? So it might mean a little bit wise, but definitely old. That's the one thing you can take from it, right? So, look, it's been interesting in a lot of ways. I agree with you. I mean, but you're also dealing with CRM itself, pure CRM, meaning operational, put into technology and systems, regardless of what all three of us used to try to champion back in the day. It ended up being technology and systems as far as CRM itself went. And when it comes to that, it's extremely mature. It's gone from when we first started around with it, nice to have, to absolute, everyone's going to have it. And it serves all markets. It's just now beginning to deepen greatly and expand widely even more into verticals. In other words, you're seeing a market that doesn't have lots of room for originality, really. So what you've seen is also a market which is huge. I mean, it's what, $45-50 billion, but at the same time is huge because of all the additional pieces that are being added to it. Now, to your immediate point on ecosystems and platforms, the reality is that, you look at the big guys, like the people you mentioned, and then Oracle and Creatio and some of the on the smaller side, and Oracle on the larger side. In addition, all of them really, they all are looking at integrated CRM. You know, every one of them. Now, the problem with all of that is none of the value adds except the ones they specifically offer are fully integrated into their system, right? They're just, and now we're seeing even a bigger move toward headless whatever, right? So as a result of that, you're seeing something that can be applied anywhere. So a lot of this is at the level of the practitioner, a decision they want to make. Do we need and it's the decision we've talked about for 20 years, right? Best of breed versus, fully integrated system. That argument's, let's say this, best of breed is still available and more easily available than ever because the integration capabilities are there. Integrated systems are there. Platforms are sort of there, and that's really where your point goes to, which is the platforms themselves get claimed to be. Very few companies are claiming CRM platforms. They're claiming CX platforms. They're claiming engagement platforms. They're claiming everything but CRM platforms, really. And very few of them are, let's say most of them are fairly opportunistic in that they kind of listen to what people think. And then they say, oh, CRM, you mean sales, right? The same old argument, which it's never been just sales, but that's why you'll still hear to this day, and this creates confusion and goes again to your point, vendors not ready with not just product, but with message, with everything. You hear, we have CRM and then we have marketing and then we have customer service, right? Well, that's like, oh, well, there's CRM and then there's CRM and then there's CRM, right? So, all of that is where the problem lies. Lots of market confusion to this day, even though a highly mature market, a lot of value adds, platforms as the sort of the platform and ecosystem being where they got to be. And with a few exceptions, although increasingly better and better, not that many companies have really highly effective, full-fledged platforms yet. So to your point, they're not ready. At another side of it, though, when it comes to just the basic systems, they have what they need, but when it comes to the platforms, I don't think they are ready yet. And I think a lot of it is also terminological confusion and things like that, which you have to get past it to understand even what goes into the platform.
I'm Brent, how do you see on the small business side?
Actually, I think small business or enterprise, I think generally speaking, the same thing is, I'm seeing it kind of on both ends of the spectrum, so to speak. I tend to believe that just generally speaking, not really pointing out any vendors or anything, just about the technology that's available today. I think the technology is actually just the technology, not the vendors providing the technology, but the technology that the vendors are creating. I think it's way ahead of not only the vendors in terms of how they pitch and message and put the platform or the technology in front of the vendors, but I think, in front of their customers. But I also think it's, just be honest, it's customers. A lot of customers today still think that once they pull out the check, or I guess now it's the Cash App,
Venmo,
or whatever the app is, Venmo. Once they make the digital payment to use the service or the platform, they think the hard work is over. And that's like the absolute easiest piece of this puzzle. It has always been that way. It's much easier to pay for something and then hope it's a silver bullet. And all right, I paid for it. Why isn't it working? It's like, I did my work. Now the app or the platform has to do it. And that's like absurd. It's just never has happened that way. And it will never happen that way. The tough work really begins, before you do the purchase, and then it continues after you do the purchase, because as you and Paul and most of the folks that we've been talking to for years say, it's not a destination, it's a journey. I mean, there is no are we there yet, because you'll never get there, because there keeps changing on you, and you have to use these things, constantly and in conjunction with all the other stuff that's going on with your company and with your industry and things of that nature. So I think generally speaking, technology just on its face can do a lot of great things, a lot greater than it did in the past. But I don't know if vendors, customers, partners are really up for the hard work of, all right, yeah, this technology is great, but how should we really be using this? And how should we be using it, not just today, but tonight, tomorrow, the next month, the next year?
Yeah, I still believe that, even though, we have a lot of value added, with technology, and there's a mature market out there, we're still running legacy concepts. I mean, let me give you one example. When you look at marketing automation, anyone, any of the 7,000 out there in the MarTech environment, the data model is around one email. You are an email, okay? When you move that transaction or that prospect to the Salesforce automation system, okay, anyone, you become a lead, okay, and then you somehow becomes a contact with an account, an opportunity, or a shopping cart. So the data model is still messed up because you're still using that email to synchronize back to the marketing automation system.
Right.
Then when you go to commerce, or you go to outbound marketing, the traditional, all the marketing clouds out there, you are not an email, you are a subscriber. Okay, so those three systems, even though you have the plugins that are integrated, and you use whatever Microsoft Informatica, Zapier to integrate, they don't have a common data model. And that goes back, to your point that, why I pay for it, why it doesn't work. Well, we forgot to tell you that you have 3 data models. You don't have one. And that's a challenge that I have with all the CRM vendors, because, we talked, in Latin America, when we talk to agencies, or we talk to multi-brands that have to do B2B and B2C in one CRM system, meaning, marketing, sales, and service, they have to deal with multiple data models. And there's no one common data models. And then they say, wait, but we can help you. Buy my CDP. And I still believe that many of the systems out there still have, a legacy system. I am anti-lead. I don't like to use the prospects. We're people. We are, we're not a transaction. We have a name. We have multiple emails. We have multiple addresses. We have, multiple buyer personas. We could be B2B, B2C tomorrow, and, the core, and it doesn't matter, if it's a vertical solution or not, that changes. However, I've seen tools where, you're bringing more and more the native marketing automation, functionality, tied together with the sales, with sales, and many years, Marketo said, we're no longer using this, we're using person, Freshworks, when you buy the Freshworks sales suite, which comes with marketing, doesn't have leads, everything is a contact, and everything is tied together. So some people are doing something, but I still believe, why do I have to go vertical if I'm a small business, to get, the new stuff? Why not the current out-of-the-box functionality should give me one data model? The data model that, Facebook has, Amazon has, and we try, okay, let me get the deals and from Facebook and LinkedIn, because they do have a data model somehow, So I see that, it's mature, but sometimes we're still running legacy system, and there is so much technical debt out there trying to put everything together, So that's the way I see it.
Well, no, I mean,
hey, can I jump in? And
yeah.
No, I was going to say, Paul, we just had Brad Maddock on CRM Playaz, who is the SVP of marketing for Slack on the Salesforce side. And one of the things that he said to us, and I think it kind of applies here, particularly what you just said about how the email address is kind of the unique identifier, and email has been around forever. He said, well, basically, paraphrasing, email has been around for 50 years, but it wasn't made for the world that we live in today in terms of how people communicate. Email is a legacy system at this point. Most people if you look at that in an internet minute thing, there are lots of DMs, there's lots of messages, there's lots of text, all those things, all these new channels that weren't around when email was first, I guess, brought in. More of the percentage of communications are going into different channels other than email. Now, email is still very significant, but if our method of communication has changed so dramatically and it's spread out to all these different channels and things that weren't even imaginable, I mean, that shows you that the technology is kind of way ahead of where we are, because, you know, we're kind of slow to adopt certain things because we don't like change. And particularly, like you were saying, Jesus, it's changed, you know, businesses, the way that they kind of communicate for decades. They don't necessarily see, you know, oh, it's a new technology, we're going to start using that and we're going to drop this. It's too hard for them to do that. So I think it's a combination of things, like you were saying. It's, you know, making it easier for folks to figure this stuff out, and making it to a certain extent as painless as possible, trying to get rid of the complexity. But then again, on the flip side, some of those companies like that because it kind of kept customers in check. You know, it kind of made it easy for them to kind of push the narrative that they wanted to push and not get too far ahead, because that might be disruptive to their business.
Well, in Latin America, you know, they are adapting to the new channels, the new data model, because, you know, you have low-end CRM system that they see in top of WhatsApp, you know, and now they're doing stuff with Amazon, they're doing stuff with Instagram and Facebook, and then you go to the high end, you know, you have companies like Yalo, you know, that they're putting together, you know, marketing automation, marketing cloud systems, you know, just to manage, you know, a connectivity with any CRM system and do WhatsApp, e-commerce via WhatsApp, customer service via WhatsApp, you know, where, you know, it changes the whole perspective, and nobody that I see in Latin America, I mean, in the US, are looking into the market, and also, I mean, working in the, you know, with a few customers in the Philippines. And yeah, email and phone calls, you know, they're important, but, you know, messaging is highly important. And they said, where does the messaging, does it fit, you know, in the data model of my CRM, the well-known CRM, you know, it's not there.
Well, again, I mean, part of the problem with that actually is, I mean, that perception or that way of presenting it, not yours, the way the businesses do, is that they're starting from the wrong place, right? To begin with, they're starting from the old data model just to present the idea of maybe a new one, right? And you can't. I mean, here's the thing. And, you know, Brent and I have talked about this on the show 8,000 times. It's sort of semi-crusade at the moment. The means, how content is created, distributed, and consumed is entirely different than what it was even 6-7 years ago. And that's because we're having a seismic generational shift. Again, my ultimate theory is that all generations end up like their parents. So it doesn't actually matter what goes on until the end of it. Well, it's true. I mean, it always happens, right? So, but here's what has happened sort of in between that point. My generation's leaving the workforce finally. Gen X is still kind of leading a lot of major companies, but starting to contemplate retirement, and it's only this big to begin with. A little less than 37% of the workforce, meaning the largest segment, are millennials. And a lot of them are in, and the millennials are no longer entitled, half-brained 18-year-olds, right? They're, or less than fully formed brained 18-year-olds. They're 40-year-old adults with families, at least the older ones are 40-year-old adult with families making important decisions. Gen Z has entered the workforce, $143 billion worth of buying power from Gen Z. I think that's just North America, but I'm not sure. It could be the world, but I'm pretty sure it's just North America. So you're talking about very powerful forces for decision-making and buying are actually out there. And the way they consume content is entirely different than anything we did. And here's the deal, though. Their impact on us, as you two as Gen X and me as baby boomer, is far greater than our impact on them. We had none on them. They have had a lot on us, right? And I'm talking about overall. Remember we used to talk about grandmothers and iPads? Well, that's actually in effect their impact on us in a very simple way, but That's how it started, right? In a certain way. So the result of that is it requires, I mean, you talk about, people who expect an individual experience with a company of some kind, some sort of individual, an interaction with it. It's proven that the company knows enough about them to help them to give them what they need to make whatever decision it is they need to make with what they're doing with that company. And that's, they're expected. It's not like that. Wow. It's not, it's expected. Right. And that requires a totally new data model, because the other thing, and this goes back to an advisory session many years ago I did with Thunderhead. And I remember Phil Venville, who is their basically resident genius, actually said to me, we want to move past this conventional marketing thing and campaigns to what the world will become, which is conversations. And he was totally right. It was too soon then, but he was totally right. Campaigns don't work the way they used to work, right? Conversations are where this all happens. And we know that from just the idea that people give a crap about interaction. The very fact they give a crap about it tells you they're thinking about conversations, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're having good ones. It simply means they're thinking about them. And so, the thing is that this change requires a completely different data model. And a lot of it is, governed by the size of this device. And all of that means if you don't start preparing now as a company, and to Brent and both your points really, but also specifically what Brent said, the technology is actually there for most of this, not all of it, but most of it. It exists. But the problem is, A, the vendors who create it don't know how to present it, and B, the companies who need it don't understand that they need it and are wedded to their existing history and to your point on legacy, right? And so, but they've got and this is, the number's a little arbitrary here, but you get the idea. Treat it for dramatic purposes. They've got about 5 years to get this straight before it's too late, because you're dealing with millennials at that point will be running those big companies, and small businesses and mid-sized businesses, which they already are, right? So it's a big deal here, and this is, I think, where it's a seismic level kind of shift that's going on, and most companies are just not prepared for it at either end. But the technology itself is available. Again, not necessarily used properly, but available. There's a lot of good.
So based on that, let's move to the next topic, which will be the pandemic. And I heard you guys mention many times, that we're using more channels. The digital transformation is not really here. And I went to Puerto Rico like 3 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, for a speaking engagement. I haven't been in a plane. I'm still hesitant to getting a plane. Actually, not in a plane, the whole experience, because I flew JetBlue. I stayed in a Marriott hotel. I was treated as a room. I was treated as a seat. So I thought, gee, these people that I know, they have all the cool technologies. They use tons of best practices. They have excellent customer experience. When I got there, they failed to recognize me. And it was, it wasn't a wow effect. I was disappointed. I said, wow, I was expecting more from JetBlue and Marriott, and I exchanged tweets and emails with them and everything, and it's still like nothing. So I don't know, because they're still, we're going into this the pandemic fatigue, or because they don't have the resources, or because the stress of flying. There's a lot of talk about let's humanize the experience, but I don't know if people are really doing this. They're just talking. It goes back to your point, Brent. Sure, here's the check, and I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the fatigue thing is definitely something you can't ignore and you can't underestimate. We're going, if I remember correctly, my last flight was March 7th, 2020. That's getting very close to 2 years coming up soon. And I never would have imagined that I would, be sitting here like this. and I mean, I love being at home, but I definitely like to go out and go to those industry events that we all go to, and actually, get a chance to see each other in person, and
Dude, I miss having
do
a
things that we usually do.
I miss having a burger with you, Brent.
Absolutely. I mean, and so there is this tired feeling. It's like I'd even take a trip to Vegas if I thought it was a good for me to go at this point. But
that's got to be just a point you're making for dramatic purposes. I don't believe you really would.
Yeah, well, I didn't say Orlando at least. So anyway,
we're going to be making a trip to Orlando.
Fatigue thing. Yeah, that fatigue thing is real. I mean, I think and it's not just the fatigue; it's the roller coaster and the fatigue. Because how many times have we, like this summer, we literally thought we had turned a corner, and then Delta came, and then it's let work. These last months trying to get through Delta, and you kind of started feeling good about it, and now Omicron came, and so there is definitely a mental fatigue, a physical fatigue, a fatigue of just, for me at least, being in this kind of the same room for most of the time. And I think, yeah, customers feel that, employees feel that, companies feel it. You can't ignore that one.
But don't you think that from the technology point of view, and I had this conversation with Eric Villalpando, which you guys met one of the conferences. He used to be with Grupo Posadas. He's in another company now. One of the Conversaciones de CRM that I had with him, he told me, hey, the pandemic just, bubbled up, the lack of data integration, the lack of data that is clean, and a lot of people, even though they want to make decisions and they want to improve digital transformation, be customer centric, they don't have the data. The data is not clean. The data is not there. And the pandemic realize that, because silos, are there, they try to put them together, but the data is not ready.
Yeah, a lot of it's also, though, the other side of it, besides that, is it goes to some of the other points you made, which is the system's deficiencies are a result of lack of staff to maintain, and I mean, it really is an issue. Like, just here's a simple example that probably slightly overstates the case. There was a vendor who wanted to order a lot of books from me recently, and I went in to set it up, and I found out from the publisher that, well, because the vendor needed it by a specific time, and if you look at the official language, it said it would get there in time. But what it turned out was something was amiss. I put the order in, something was amiss, and I went to talk to them, and I said, they told me, well, we actually were kind of understaffed right now, and as a result of that, some of the maintenance on some of the systems is a little bit poor, and in the meantime, we're getting far too many. The number of orders that are in the queue are just backlogging and blah blah blah. But it added up to what we now famously all know is supply chain issues and production issues, and it wouldn't get there in time, so I canceled the order. Right, so it's an order, at least from the standpoint of the value of it, it was worth a pretty decent chunk of money, but you can't get it on time. So, but that's typical. Like, so I have flown twice, and I stayed at and what did I stay at? I stayed at a Hyatt. I stayed at a Ritz-Carlton on Half Moon Bay, and then we took a train to New York last weekend, Yvonne and I, and we stayed at the Ritz-Carlton there on Marriott points I had, basically. And you could see, and Ritz-Carlton in New York was probably the most advanced on how they were handling it all, but you could see the strain on everybody. I mean, it's there, and it's COVID strain, but there's another aspect of it. It's not just the understaffing, but it's also the uncertainty, not just of the virus, but on what are we doing when we come out of this? We're not exactly sure yet. We're still trying to figure this out. Like, for example, we were going to do the Bring Your Own Band, the BYOB 2021, but the companies that would have normally participated, who actually even agreed to, we realized we're going to be just distracted by trying to figure out how to go back to work, right? And these are big companies, so they're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands, potentially, people that they're talking about. That strain is enormous on the companies because they don't really, we all talk, yes, it's definitely hybrid. Okay, but what's hybrid? It means mix. So this, right? Okay, we get it. It's digital and analog, but there's a lot more to that than just saying hybrid, right? And look, and if you look at every company, their game plan is different. Every single one has a different game plan and a different level of mixing. And there's so much of that out there that, to your JetBlue and Marriott point, I'm guessing, well, I mean, let's put it this way. Marriott's systems are messed up anyway. They always have been because they have 800 vendors in the same place all the time, and they keep changing them. It's a history with them, 30 years of history of doing exactly that. And that creates problems continuously, even though I appreciate the programs they have. But, you know, I'm just guessing a lot of it is just all of the things we've just all talked about converging to the point where, you know what, we probably can find you in our database, but we're just too tired, right?
That's pretty much what the guy told me when I got there in San Juan, you know. Brent, let me ask you this, because I know you when you were talking about, you know, a small business and enterprise, you were like, yeah, it's about the same, or you were hesitant in there. If there's a difference today with verticals and you know, the Sohos and the Salesforce of the world, you know, for small and enterprises?
Yeah. So when I was talking, you know, earlier, I was just kind of more generalizing, you know, at a very high level, you know, the issue. But no, I mean, there's definitely huge differences between, you know, the needs and the expectations from, you know, on the smaller side of the house than from the enterprise, of course. And I think the challenge is just, you know, the SMBs, particularly when it came. I'll even break it down to like the more traditional SMBs that were not, you know, digital native companies that born in the cloud. You know, they even have a, you know, actual physical footprint. They had to make the biggest transition of everybody, I think, because they're great at localized face-to-face interactions with their customers. They have a better, just like a top of mind knowledge of them there, because they interact with them on a much, you know, more physical level. And then all of a sudden, you know, the pandemic hit, and people couldn't come to their stores. And so they had to like completely, to a certain extent, recreate, you know, how they actually do business, and do it more digitally and do it in the cloud. So that caused a number of kind of disruptions. I hate to use that term, but, you know, gotta call it like it is. But I think maybe the biggest disruption is, how do they take all of that great engagement skill and interest that they're able to do kind of naturally when it's people walking into their store, and translate that digitally to people that may have never walked into their store, but still need the product or service they offer. And I think that's been the hugest challenge for them. How do we, you know, take what we do great and bring it to the world in a way that they can, you know, show the greatness of their engagement skills. And I think that's been the biggest challenge. Now, some of them have been great, but I think the more traditional and maybe the more older the businesses, the tougher that challenge has been. Because I've heard from folks that, you know, completely changed their business model from you know, selling stuff in a store to offering services online based on their relationship building skills. So they stopped selling what they were selling because nobody was coming in the store, but they were able to keep the relationship. And because they were able to keep the relationship, they started asking, well, I know you can't come in here and get this, but what are some of the other things that you're really having an issue with? Maybe we can, you know, work with you to figure out something. And so you started seeing that happen all over the place. So I think smaller businesses, in a number of ways, there's been a lot of success stories because they, maybe because they were forced into having to think differently and to do things differently, they did it. And they found out that, hey, you know what? We're still here and we still have our customer relationship, even if it's not the exact same thing that we did with them in the past. We were able to stay with them and figure out a path forward because we had a great relationship with those folks.
Yeah, in Latin America, definitely, commerce and messaging, it doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small business or mom and pops in the corner, they're starting to use more CRM. And when I say CRM is, a commerce type with the database or Soho, for example, integrated with Shopify, for example. And that, if you look at all the trends in Latin America, that is growing, and messaging, faithful messaging, Google messaging is growing a lot too, and of course, the call centers, having a conversation with somebody. People want to have a conversation. Saying that, there is a difference between the small business and the enterprise in Latin America from the budget perspective. You have huge companies, with budgets that are for a small business. Okay. For the enterprise or for the department. And let me classify this and put this in perspective, because you have, multinationals, from outside Latin America. You have Latin American multinationals, you have regional multinationals, and then you have, the small business who is in Chile and Argentina. Okay. So that needs to be classified in depending how you're going to sell CRM. So all these add-ons that you see on the email, like Gmail or Outlook, for CRM, the Nimbles of the world, there's 200 of them in Latin America. At the same time, there's 200 of them, that are using Soho, Freshworks, a lot of stuff in the fintech market. They're using Service, Zendesk, and all the others. But there's one thing that's extremely common, WhatsApp. So it doesn't matter if you are a big enterprise or you're a small business, that's the channel. So, and that goes back to that's very common. It doesn't matter. Again, the only difference is that you're gonna start using WhatsApp Business API. If you want to formalize the process, but large enterprises and a small business, that's the tool that they want to use to do exactly what you just told Brent. They're gonna achieve from come to the store to buy. Or I'm going to go to have dinner with you somewhere in a restaurant in Mexico to, buy digital, and let's engage via WhatsApp, and that's the growth. And that's what, sometimes, the going back to the legacy is important, so that's part of that. Hi, Adriana. She says, so good to see you guys together.
One of my favorites ever.
So that's part of the system. Yeah, I tell her to hunt for Brent every time that she goes to Boston for hotspot. say hi to Brent. Say hi to Brent. But that's what I see. So let me ask you this: what's new? Anything that you saw in 2021 that you said, "Gee, this is wasn't expected," or this is something that is new besides using live streams and virtual events? Anything that you saw? Wow, I didn't see that coming.
No, not that way. I've seen I've seen some interesting technologies that I'm glad to see. And there are companies doing some things that haven't been done much or well before. But as far as, in a cynical way, I could say, yeah, meaning I'm seeing vendors buy into things I never thought they would because they're smart to buy into. But a lot of vendors are actually getting the fact that they have to align themselves with the market as it's becoming, as well as what it is. And that's really interesting to me, because in the past they resisted it, even though they were the technology world producing all this stuff. They still resisted that, because they catered just to the customer base, and they didn't pay any attention to the market itself, even though they claimed to. So I'm seeing a lot of that. But on a particular level, there's some really interesting companies out there, like One I like is this company that actually the one Martin Schneider now works for, Support Logic. I really like what they're doing. And I'll tell you, the only company, for those of you who don't know Support Logic, first of all, look it up, and you should. But secondly, effectively, they're monitoring real-time agent and customer conversations and analyzing it in real time, both for triggers, cues, and emotions, as well as best next action, right? And it's in real time. And it's absolutely, and the actual UI they use is fantastic. It's color coded basically. And so, and the only company I ever saw that looked at emotions kind of the way these guys do was Clarabridge, which of course got acquired by Qualtrics this year. And that was if you want to talk about what may have been the best acquisition of the year, that may have been it. It was one of them for sure. And because they're looking at, look, we're in a world now where if we really are talking conversation, we're talking emotion and sentiment. It's not sentiment. That's actually a really poor term for it. It is emotional and behavioral, right? And it's very much the right brain is becoming the dominant way of looking at the world, as opposed to what it used to be with CRM in its early days, which is the left brain, so to speak, mathematical and measure. We still have to do that, but it's no longer the primary way people are looking at things. We're also finally getting to a point, which is interesting, which our mutual buddy Esteban Kolsky has, of course, always said, where people are finally understanding the customer owns the journey, not the company, right? And they're finally getting that after all these years. They're finally understanding that in all ends. And I think from the standpoint of an understanding, that's important. And, discussion was had a million times, but I think, I don't want to say this was unexpected, but I'd say it was the scale of it and the scope of it and the impact of it was incredibly fast, was the rise of TikTok and what it's actually meant to the enterprise as well as everything else, right? I mean, you're talking about a whole area where a few years ago we would have dismissed that as kids dancing the shuffle pretty much, and being narcissists, but it's not that. It's much better than that. And by the way, I highly recommend that everybody read Eugene Wei's blog posts on TikTok's algorithm. They're incredible and they're really well written. And I guess I'll put in a Playaz plug here and watch the show we had him on. Find it and watch it. Eugene Wei, and it's WEI for Way. Okay, so
well, you mentioned TikTok. I want to go back to what Brent mentioned about the Slack, and I know in one of the briefing with Salesforce and Slack, they mentioned something that the attention span in messaging is higher, and I think that's part of what, any technology that brings the attention span and can measure the emotions somehow. I think that's where I think, a lot of the CX needs to focus, towards that, because it's still, people are talking about CX, but they're talking after the fact. They're not talking as part of as a whole, And I think if you pay attention to those conversations, to that attention span, then you're gonna get to the emotion, and you're gonna be able. If I go to the hotel in San Juan, you should be able to identify me, I'm getting all sweaty, and recognize me. You should be able to listen to that somehow, engage in that conversation, and beat that. So I think we sort of talked about that many years ago in CRM Idols. We truly need to have that, like that social media functionality, or way back to social CRM, that social media, the conversations. I think it boils down to the conversation. We need to include those conversations that we, if probably we want to summarize something, I'll let Brent to speak to that if you want to. It's no longer transactions. We need to focus more in the conversation.
Look, transactions are just a subset of interaction, and I think people need to pay attention to that. There's more meaning in the transaction than there is. There's more value in the meaning of the transaction than there is in the actual bookkeeping, accounting entry. And I think people need to pay much more attention to that side of it. So, to your point, conversations. Look, I mean, think about it throughout history. I mean, what does an intelligence organization do for the most part? They're not just hacking into systems. They're literally if you're looking at World War II and all these other, they were listening in on conversations. that was what they were doing, right? It's not like this is like some brand new idea that we all came up with that, oh, we can learn a lot from a conversation. I mean, it's pretty much how humans communicate, right? You learn from the communication you had with the other person or other people, right? And that's the way it works. And so right now, to your earliest point, Jesus, the tricky part really is capturing the data and then doing something with it, right? Not while the conversations are going on, as they're going on, right? So that, because of the expectation of the customer or the prospect or the person who wants you to be their trusted advisor, that you're going to respond to them as quickly as they are asking you, right? So I think that's the tricky part, but at the same time, we're not really talking about anything new. I think we're just talking about a mindset change where people are getting past the idea that you have to have these controlled marketing campaigns. And instead, we're saying, no, join in on the conversation. People will do a lot better with you on that one. The genius of some of the companies like Salesforce is they figured that out.
Yeah, no, I think, it's all a lot of kind of traditional thinking and the way businesses were created before, the last 2 decades was, they had a lot of control and a lot of power over, over the interaction and the relationship they had with customers. And as, this digital age put more power in the hands of customers to be able to find competitors or be able to switch from one vendor to the other and not have to have such a gut-wrenching thing happen. The internet kind of made that pretty easy. That put more power in control of customers and consumers, and vendors. They've tried to fight it all the way, but they're at a point where they know they can't. And you think about the subscription model and the subscription economy. Vendors have to prove on a regular, ongoing basis that they're providing enough value to a customer to make them want to sign up. Before, you had to buy for a year, or once they bought the thing, well, I'll talk to you when we have an upgrade. Now vendors can't do that, and they shouldn't want to do that, because the more engagement you have with customers, the more you're going to learn about them, and hopefully the better relationship you can build. And so I think a lot of that traditional thinking, and like Paul said earlier, because this new generation, these younger guys are coming up, younger folks are coming up, they're going to be used to already having a significant amount of power over how they do things and how they engage. And if you don't get with that program, I think, Jesus, you said that earlier too, it's going to be game over, because these folks aren't going to be sitting around trying to, ask for certain things. They're going to expect these things. And if they don't get it, they'll either create their own or they'll go to somebody else who will. And it's easier to do that now than there ever been before.
Exactly. And they'll kick your ass too.
I know. And traditional, we're going to forgive that company. Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you. My experience, I'm going to complain, whatever, yell, ice cream, but I'm still going to be using you. But the new generation, no, they're going to be gone.
Well, no, and they're going to make it known why they did it. I mean, that's the thing. The thing about this is so funny. Look, I was actually literally reading my own book the other day. I was actually looking. Well, believe me, once you end up writing the book, you don't want to read it ever again. I can guarantee it. Thank you, sir. But I was trying to find something, and I ended up by actually just sheer coincidence. The first thing I opened the page to was my own definition of engagement, right? And keep in mind what it says. It's the ongoing interactions between company and customer. But the key phrase is the next one: offered by the company, chosen by the customer. And the key thing there is, the key things there are, first of all, offered by the company has a very interesting implication, which is the company has enough power over its own decisions to make offers that are within the constraints it has. And that's fair. I mean, a company can't offer everything to everybody. That's the companies who claim they're going to delight people all the time are offering everything to everybody, and really can't do that. I mean, you're constrained automatically from your birth as a company. I mean, your immediate constraint is you incorporate, you're constrained by law immediately, right? It's like the second you were born, somebody comes, the FBI comes and raids you for violating something because you screamed too loud that night, right? So, so you have those constraints. What the customer wants, and all they truly want, look, they want to control. Originally I used to say the only thing that the entire human species has in common is they want to be happy, but I've modified that recently. The only thing the entire human species has in common is they want to find a purpose that makes them happy, right? And that's actually what it more is. And that's take it from the existential side. But the reality is that says one thing. I want to make my choices for me. And that's what it says. I'm an individual human. I mean, we see it overexpressed now with things with cancel culture and all these other things. They're way overdone. But the concept broadly is I'm an individual. I have a life. I want to control as much of that life as I can and make the choices I want to make. And then whether they work out or not, it's on me. But I want to be able to make those choices within the constraints, of course, of the fact that I want to violate every other civil and social, individual and rule in existence. But that's the key. When a company says, look, here's what we know about you, in effect, not literally, here's what we know about you. Here are the 10 things that we think are relevant to you. Pick 3. And again, I'm really oversimplifying, obviously, but the point is, there's 2 things that happened. The company literally controlled all that it can control, which is what choices it offers, right? And the customer still controls what it wants to, which is to make the choice of what it wants of those offers, right? It can't take, if the offers they're offering are 1, 2, and 3, the customer doesn't have the right to say even, I want 5. They have the right to leave the company because they didn't get 5, but they don't have the right to say, I want 5, and you don't have it. Now, they have the right to say it. The company doesn't have to do it, right? But those are decisions you're always making every day, right? I mean, where the balance between obtaining customers who are demanding something outside your constraints versus letting them go because you can't do it, because you go under if you do it. Things like that, and obviously nuanced in a million other ways. But the net is customer retains choice, company retains its own control over its own business decisions. That's how it works. And the conversation between them is 2 peers having that conversation. Hi, company, I have a job I want to do. I need your company to buy what it is I need to buy to do that job. Can you give it to me? And the company says, well, I can give you this, this, and this. I said, well, how about this? No, can't do that. Or yes, we can. This is how it works, okay? And it's just normal human interaction at so many levels, minus the idiocies that you get from people who are protecting their fiefdoms all the time.
Yeah, and that boils down to, if you want to have a conversation, you need to empower your employees, in front desk,
Right.
and the back office with data, so they can make actions based on that data. Otherwise, there's no conversation. You go to keep doing transactions. The stamp of approval. You don't want that to happen.
I'm going to send JetBlue your profile information, boy. That clearly irritated you.
Oh yeah, big time.
Holy cow!
I won't tell you the bad experience that I had, but it's common sense stuff, So yeah, so I kept quiet, and after I left the airport, I complained because they were under stress anyway, because all this stuff is happening. Well, we have like 2 or 3 minutes. Where do we find you, CRM Playaz?
Well, one thing, probably at home.
I would say Thursdays at 3 p.m. On any of your local social channels that you create or use. We're there. But hey, Jesus, I'm going to share something that I would love for you to share for the folks, because this literally popped up as a memory today.
Yes. Wow.
Where was that taken?
Dreamforce.
That was at Dreamforce 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Those are the dinners that we used to do with Solvis, at the Dreamforce. That
restaurant you could walk down. I remember.
Yeah, and that was probably when the first Dreamforce, when right after the Radiant 6 event in Boston,
Yeah.
You know that, you know, and this is officially when, you know, I think the social studio became social studio.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a long time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very sure to say, if you see Cindy now, she has short hair. So she's like, oh my
I
goodness, that's
still
my
have short
hair.
hair too. I have short hair too still. So
Yeah. So wow, many years ago. Cute. Thank you, man. Thank you
and
for doing that.
that's what I miss. That's the stuff I miss by not being able to go to these events, that kind of thing there.
Yeah. Yes. Like Rai saying, I'm in home too. We all are. Cool. Well, so every Thursday at 3 o'clock, in your local, you know, social channels in the CRM Playaz hashtag, you know, they will find you. Follow them. I'm
Definitely.
pretty sure that,
And
you
they
know,
definitely got to find us for this Thursday, because you'll be there too.
I'll be
That's
there
right.
as well. I'll be there as well. So 3:30, 3:30.
No.
The
Three.
full show is 3, but yeah, about 3:30. After we're done warming everybody up, we'll have you on at 3:30.
Perfect. So cool. So now let me do the outro here. Paul, Brent, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. As you probably you don't know, but this goes into podcast. So that's where I have more listeners. So it's gonna go to Spotify and SoundCloud and so on and so on and so on. There's like 200 of them. I don't know how many, but of them. Okay. So when I have it ready, I'll let you know. Anything else you guys want to say? We have like 1 minute or so.
Nope.
Yes,
No?
thank you.
I'm good.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Well,
And
we will be continuing on Thursday.
absolutely.
We'll be on
Right.
we'll be on Thursday. Don't go. Stay here for a second. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna do the outro, but don't leave me, okay? I'm gonna do the outro en Spanish, okay? Bueno, como ya saben, esto fue Conversaciones de CRM. Me pueden seguir los viernes en Tomando Café con Jesús Hoyos, y los podcasts que no son los live streaming, pues cápsula de Customer Engagement, que son los lunes. Este fue el último episodio de Conversaciones de CRM, así que voy a tener como 2 más de Tomando Café y 1 o 2 más de cápsula de Customer Engagement, así que se me cuidan. Hasta la próxima. Y gracias a Paul y a Brent Leary por estar aquí presente en estas conversaciones de CRM crossover con CRM Playaz. Hasta la próxima. Pórtense bien, cuídense.